We are virtual, so we also want to acknowledge that there are individuals, including our authors, joining us from other territories from across Canada. So thank you. Before I turn things over to New West Press and our special guests, I just want to mention that, of course, we have the authors' books available. They are online. Anne's book, taken by the MUSE, and Norm's book, Horseplay. I will be putting a link in the, or sorry, I have put a link in the chat along with our contact information. We offer curbside pickup or delivery for those of you who are in our vicinity. If you are joining us from a further distance, we mail books absolutely anywhere. So I would now like to turn things over to New West Marketing Director, Claire Kelly.
Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you all and the readers, and thanks to Kelly from Audrey's Books for reading the land acknowledgement. We're here on Zoom tonight for a double header reading and a Q&A with two of our recent debut nonfiction authors, Wheeler and Norm Boucher. My thinking in pairing these two authors is that both had long and successful careers in non-book industries that their debuts do connect with. I am personally a fan of seeing work and economy represented in books, but I also get very tired of author protagonists. So their books were just a really pleasant cure for my tiredness at seeing that. I just wanted to let you know kind of what I was thinking about when I paired them. We are recording the reading. You can feel free to leave your cameras on so that the readers aren't feeling like they're reading into the void, so to speak. But we will only have the readers and host mics on to prevent background noise. After both authors read, we'll be having a Q&A, so put your questions in the chat box and I will read them out to the authors. Our first author is Norm Boucher. Norm left Montreal at the age of 19 to begin a long and rewarding career as an RCMP officer, mostly dedicated to drugs and organized crime. An active member of the RCMP undercover program for over 10 years, his assignments include drug trafficking, money laundering, and homicide. In 1983, Staff Sergeant Boucher spent 8 months infiltrating the heart of Vancouver's heroin scene. This became his memoir that he's reading from tonight. In 2012, Norm retired from the RCMP, dedicating his time to writing and his work as a consultant. Both authors have an impressive list of things they are recipients of. Norm is a recipient of the Governor General's Medal of Bravery, the Carnegie Medal, and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. He's the proud father of 4 children. I consider those 4 medals, I guess. And he now lives in Manotick, Ontario, with his wife Sally and their dog Cooper. Horseplay was recently announced as a finalist for the most startlingly named award in Canada, the Brass Knuckles Award for Best Nonfiction Crime Book at the Crime Writers of Canada Awards of Excellence. Welcome and congrats, Norm.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So I guess I'll be reading a passage of the book, and I guess to situate the passage itself, the operation took place mainly for a big part in a bar called the Blackstone Hotel, the Granville Strip, and that's where the heroin action was happening in those days. So what I'm going to read is I guess you could say it's the segment between the first and the second act, if we had 3 acts, for example. Where at the beginning we made some steps and tried to get close to people, get to infiltrate people who were dealing in heroin, and it was hard, it wasn't easy, and then I just kind of got in a little bit, and the second part from there takes off in a way that now I'm becoming more accepted. So this is a transition from one to the other, and the reason why I picked this passage is because being in a bar and in a scene, I deal with a lot of people. There's a lot of characters in this book. So this passage will introduce a few of the characters. They come and go, and they're not necessarily the main characters of the book because the story is driven by storylines that involve other characters. But but it gives you an idea of the feel for the place at the time and where I was at during that time. So here we go. It's called Joining the Beehive. I can't say exactly how it comes to be that you find yourself accepted in a group. It's not so much that you have to look and think like the rest, but rather that you act and look the way they expect you to act and look. You can be a priest in a whorehouse as long as the whores peg you as a rotten, sex-driven priest, or else as a savior of desperate souls. Just don't try to save their souls after a night of sex. I am no longer a mark. And if you walk into any bar of the world, you are either an outsider or a local. And if you are an outsider and have something they want, there's a good chance that you will be a mark to somebody. The dealers are beginning to accept me because they see that I have ties to some of the people around me, even if they can't tell how deep these relationships go. To make it work, I don't buy 2 caps as most junkies do, and as I was told to do in my briefings. I buy just one. That's what I do. I'm in pretty good shape and I don't look like a heavy user. That's who I am in my mind, and the story works for the junkies because heavy users like to teach new users how to fix. Heroin is the only thing they know a lot about. After a buy, I disappear to my place without a word. I don't talk much and no one asks questions. All junkies have a secret room of their own and they understand. I'm no longer an outsider. It was like that when I approached Crowley for a cap. He had been selling heroin all afternoon, doing deal after deal near my table, and he was in a good mood, even friendly. Crowley is a heavy user and a nervous dealer, but I was at ease with who I am, and he felt it. I would if I could, he said, but I don't really know you. Maybe if I see you fix or something. Cool, no hard feelings. 2 days later, when he had a half bundle left in the back of his mouth, I went to him again, this time asking if he had seen Harry. You looking, he asked. Yeah. How many? Just one. Okay, meet me in the washroom. Just like that. Crowley is violent and cagey, and meeting him alone in the washroom wasn't my first choice. But I was up for it. I just had to make sure to watch his hands and look for anything that didn't fit. Like a quick word to a friend before going to the bathroom or a change of plan at the last minute. But once we stood on the urine-covered floor near the broken sink, I never understood what kind of violence could break a ceramic sink. Crowley was relaxed and spat the bundle out right away. He looked at me in an overly affable way, the way people who have seen violence often do when it's time for friendly business. Have you seen the bulls anywhere today? He asked while untying the bundle. No. It's weird, man. I haven't seen them all day, he continued while dropping the cap on my score paper. In the following days, I kept coming back to the Blackstone and sat with my group against the wall. We chatted and waited, and I scored from whomever had. Harry Bell and his hooker girlfriend, Maggie, Kitty, who moonlights at the Jerry's Cafe, Sammy Price, a known dealer recently out of jail, and a few others. Everyone had his or her way, and I had to work for it because the heat is always on their mind. Some sat quietly while others were constantly on the move, but they all watched for the heat. With Scotty, the whole thing was social. He arranged deals while playing pool, and I only knew that he was a user because I had seen him once on a heavy nod. Otherwise, he didn't look like a hype. Scotty is corpulent and energetic, his green eyes framed by a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and a thick mass of curly black hair. He seemed always happy, and when he's not on the nod, you can hear his laugh from any table in the Blackstone. We played some pool, and after he beat me square, I walked up close to him. Anybody got? How many? He said. I just want to join. Just one? Yeah. I have to charge you $2. Okay, I guess, what can you do? When you live in a shoe, he says. Soon after, a girl sat on my lap and planted a kiss on me, pushing the cap wrapped in tinfoil deep into my mouth. That really got to me, to risk going to jail for $2. But it was more than that, I guess. Sell a few and then get a free cap at the end. The $2 also got you the beer that allowed you to sit in the Blackstone. We meet each other daily. It feels good to be part of the group and to look at things from the inside. A few weeks before, I was an outsider and a threat to them. Now I'm still a threat, but no longer an outsider. I am part of the pack, a pack brought together by the war on drugs. We all know why we are sitting at these tables, and no one really trusts anybody, but everyone works hard to get their fix. Real hard work every day. The hypes get up sick most mornings, fixing the leftovers from the night before, finding out who's got and watching for the heat and anything else that doesn't fit. Always hoping not to get ripped off and then fixing again. And waiting, always waiting. With Maggie, I waited 2 hours while she came and went, giving me updates on where the stuff was and when it would arrive. I didn't say anything. I just waited like the others. With grass or Coke, if you wait 2 hours for a street deal, you have to be impatient and talk about the party you're going to, or your own customer waiting and why you want to get going. No need to talk about that with Aaron. We all know why we want it. You sit there sick and everyone understands. So when she was ready, Maggie and I walked out together and followed her old man, Harry, down Granville Street, keeping to about 20 feet behind him. We watched anything that moved around us until at the corner of Granville and Helmkin, we spotted a man coming toward us and we became nervous. I was about to pretend to ask her for direction, but she turned to me and stepped in close. Talk to me as if you were a trick, she whispered. How much for a blowjob was the best I could come up with. Maggie didn't flinch. To my mind, asking her where I could buy bus tickets would have also been a pretty good decoy, but I thought of the many nights I saw her standing alone in that corner waiting for her next trick, and I began to understand the business side of her job. Maggie sells sex, and to her, this was the most natural thing to do. It brings the cash home every day, and between that and her old man's heroin deals, they have enough to fix and pay for the bills. When the man was gone, we turned around the corner and I gave her the money. Harry gave me the cap. They work well together and don't rip people off. Charlie McKenna is an odd guy. Almost every day since the operation began, he came into the Blackstone and sat quietly in front of his beer. He has all the looks of the pothead you come across in high school. The loner with the black leather jacket, good jeans, hair longer than everyone else, regardless of the decade. To me, he is the guy who during school recess smokes a doobie alone against the back fence of the schoolyard where no one else ever goes. In the Blackstone, this tall and balding 40-year-old man wears a mullet and a black Fu Manchu mustache drips from the corners of his mouth. He is tall and a loner, often choosing a table in a corner where he sits by himself. People come to him because he can make things happen, but when he isn't dealing, it's almost impossible to get any type of conversation going with him. He just sits there as if he has nothing left to give. Since the first time I saw him in the Blackstone, Charlie has watched me often enough because that's all he does, watch people from his table, his bare forehead catching the light. Even when we didn't really know each other, it was okay to sit with him and not say anything. There was a kind of familiarity between us, the kind you build after long periods of silence, me watching him and him watching me while we waited separately for our next deal. When I first asked if he had, Charlie told me to meet him on the 5th floor at the Austin. On my way to meet him, I saw Scotty waiting for the elevator. I thought they might have arranged to rip me, but Scotty probably thought of the same thing. He was talkative and nervous as we entered the elevator. It's my day today, he said. The Scottish holiday. I've got to celebrate. Great, I said lamely. Elevator talk is universal, whether you're going to score drugs or on your way to apply for a job. We came off to a deserted 3rd floor and then climbed the stairs to a 4th, where we waited until Charlie was done dishing out a couple of caps to a girl I knew from the Blackstone. After my deal, I took an elevator right up to the 5th floor, then back down. Once I came out of the Austin, the girl came to me and we walked to the parking lot behind Theo's together, where she asked me if I wanted to go fix with her. I declined, but offered to give her a ride up Robson Street. We headed out all the way to Denman, where the tourists were walking lazily, and then circled back to Robson. I made a few turns I didn't need and told her I wanted to look around for heat since we were carrying. You connected, I asked. Yeah, but my old man isn't around. Let me know when he's around. Maybe we can do something. The girl kept her head looking straight ahead. Okay, but I don't really know you. Like, maybe he'll want to do something with you, but that's his decision. No problem. How do you manage when he's not around? I do okay. I charge $30 for a blowjob, but you gotta wear a condom, she said, looking at me straight and not without pride. That's pretty good money. Yeah, she said, turning her gaze to the shops passing by, but I don't really like to work when my old man is out of town. Whenever I deal with people in an operation, I try not to get into their personal lives. With Aaron, it's easy because the relationship begins and ends with the drug. I don't know where Wendy or Scotty or Charlie came from or how they got into heroin in the first place. I don't know anything about their family. Everyone has a story, but no one gets into it. Together, they are the last cog in a machine that brings heroin from the poppies of Thailand to the streets of Vancouver. They'll sell to anyone interested in trying it, and their fear of informants and undercover officers is the only thing standing in the way. They are heavy users, but have to work for it. If they don't, they'll end up on Hastings struggling for pills. Kitty is a busy dealer, but she never works the street and seems to have a good handle on things. She has short, curly blonde hair and blue eyes that carefully scrutinize the people around her. Well into her 30s, she is steady, sharp, and has the respect of the regulars. The time I went to her to score, she remembered what table I was sitting at the night before and the table where I sat the night before that. She didn't say anything about the time I went to Jerry's Cafe to have some stew, but I knew that she remembered that as well. I didn't bring it up, but I said I knew her old man, and we talked about him a bit. He's from up north, isn't he? I said. Yeah, he works in Whitehorse. She did the deal. Don't tell a heroin addict to get a job. He or she has one, and I don't know if there are many legitimate employees who work as hard every day to get what they need. Hanging out with them every day to buy heroin, I have to look out for the heat because I don't want to get my throat squeezed by the cops. And whenever I do a deal, I have to make sure I'm not going to get ripped off. It makes for a full day. I also have to work to keep my story straight and not get burned. Like them, I watch for anything that doesn't fit. And I get tired after a day's work, just doing what the average heroin addict does every day. And I don't even have to deal with the sickness. Kitty does everything I do, but she also has to deal with the sickness. Sick or not, she has to get out there and arrange a meet to score her bundle, the 25 caps that she buys for around $400, and which she will sell for $35 each. That would be over $400 in her pocket if she didn't use. That's as much as a dozen transactions for which she faces jail time, just so she can get her fix. The problem is that when you hold that much dope, it's pretty easy to climb up to it and become a bigger addict. After injecting her profit into her arm, unable to cover the cost of a new bundle, she will fill the gap by selling Valium and working at Jerry's Cafe, the sickness grating at her like the permanent moan of a blown speaker. And that's it for this part.
Thanks, Norm. I've always appreciated your book because it is very empathetic, which truthfully, I've not hung around with police officers before, but it's not something I, in my experience, have grown to expect. So I'm always not surprised, but I'm always taken by how empathetic the book is.
Mhm. Well, I think I think it also. I mean, the one thing about this is getting into the life of a heroin addict and dealing with the drugs. You really enter their world totally. Like, I mean, you know, like I say, we don't talk about family or anything, but that's probably because their whole life is there basically. And so one thing of spending all that time, you know, and being so close because everybody is afraid of the police and afraid of being ripped off. All this, you share all these common fears and all this effort every day, and I think that opens up my eyes to the human side of who they were, and that's how I ended up, you know, that's how it ended up leaving an impression on me, and basically changing somewhat the way I felt at the time about because I was always looking to go up and go like other policemen, go into more drugs and all this, but it really occurred to me how centered. Oh, the heroin or drug problem is centered on the users at the end, and that's where we have to look. And you know, led me to more strongly about talks of prevention and education and all that.
Yeah, thanks for reading. It's an important book. Everyone listening, there's the chat box. That's where your questions go. So if you have a question for Norm or Anne or about their books, keep it to the books probably, but yeah, throw your questions in there. Our second reader this evening is Anne Wheeler. Alberta-born Anne Wheeler earned degrees in mathematics and music, while performing in theater whenever possible. Her first films were documentaries, but by the 1980s, she was making Canadian features such as Bye Bye Blues, The Diviners, Better Than Chocolate, and Loyalties, winning numerous national and international awards. A master storyteller, she has garnered 7 honorary doctorates. Is it still 7, Anne? Have you secretly gotten?
Yeah, no, I haven't gotten any more.
You've not gotten a pandemic honorary doctorate that I don't know about. And again, this list again I get to read out of accomplished accolades for both an Order of Canada and a Lifetime Achievement Award, being the first woman to do so from the Directors Guild of Canada. She lives in White Rock, BC, and continues to write, direct, and mentor younger filmmakers. Taken by the Muse was just announced as a finalist for the Robert Crouch, I always say his name wrong, City of Edmonton Book Prize, co-sponsored by the official booksellers this evening, Audrey's Books. A warm welcome and congrats to Anne.
Well, thank you very much. It was hard to decide what story to go for here, but I'm going from one called Downside Up. It starts in the early 70s when I was trying to work my way into being a part of a co-op that was all guys. It seemed like I was always editing and assisting and organizing and budgeting and all of that. And I was there one day when none of them were there. They were all off doing a film, and I was in the office, and I answered the phone, and it was a fellow from the Saddle Lake Reserve north of Edmonton. And he was phoning to hire a cameraman, he said, to document the breaking of the earth, the first time they were going to turn over the turf on the reservation. They were going to plant it, they were going to try agriculture, and they wanted it to be documented. Well, I said, okay, we'll send someone up. Well, of course, there was no one to send up except me, and I'd never done it before. And also all of our equipment was gone, so I had to order in some from Vancouver. And so I was taking a bit of a risk, finding an opportunity to prove myself a worthy member of the gang. So I'm going to jump right in here. I've ordered the camera, and I'm up before dawn and waiting at the airport long before the camera package arrives. The flight is late and the paperwork confusing, but by 7:30, I'm on the road. Saddle Lake is about 150 miles north, so I'll have to drive like spit to get there in time. I pull the manual and the camera out of the case. I'll have to figure out how to load the 100-foot reels before I get there. The man said it's a snap. The only film equipment I know is the stuff we have accumulated at Film West. Besides cameras, we've got some good prime lenses, a couple of light meters, 3 tripods, and a Lowell lighting kit. The guys tell me that we have something called a dildo, which they use, but I guess we don't really need it because I've never seen it. And I don't want to admit that I don't know what it is, even though I don't know what it looks like. I learned by watching and try not to ask too many stupid questions. Things have a way of revealing themselves. All I know is that a dildo must be very small and not essential, or I would have been needing it by now. Once I get onto the highway, I plant the manual on the steering wheel and find the diagram that makes the loading the film look so simple. Trouble is, I can't get the camera open, which is a step number one. Traffic is sparse, which is a good thing, as I swerve from one side of the road to the other, attempting to pry the camera open with both hands while driving with my knees. After a near-death experience, I pull over and park on the shoulder. For heaven's sakes, I mutter to myself, you have to know how to open the damn thing. Frustrated, I examine the contraption and find the magic latch, which is at a standstill, humiliatingly obvious. But loading the toy is tricky. You have to use a built-in blade to trim the end of the film, then thread it perfectly straight through the impossible-to-see opening. I do this several times, imagining the chief with the big voice that called me, watching me as I try to look like a real pro. Now I'm really late. The school buses are on the road, tractors are moving out onto the fields, and commuter traffic is heading into the city. I put a brush through my hair and push my foot to the floor. There's a crowd hanging around the travel band office by the time I arrive. I find a parking place amongst the herd of trucks and get out my gear and get ready. Nobody takes any notice of me. They're all looking up at the bright blue sky, squinting to see that tiny dot circling above them. Suddenly it drops down dangerously, looking for a place to land. The people whoop and cheer as the small airplane lines up its course in the distance. Squealing with delight, students pour out of the school across the road, pointing up and cheering as it approaches. There's been a lot of rain, so the fields are bright green and wild with new growth. Shallow pools of water stretch off into the distance, reflecting the cloudless blue sky. I won't be surprised if the new tractor waiting on the side of the road gets stuck today. I'll pull on my big boots. At the last minute, the pilot decides to land on the road and heads right for the crowd of onlookers. People scatter, come into the ditch full of ice-coldly water as the flying machine descends right upon us. The wings tilt this way and that, getting pushed around by the air currents, and what appears to be a very calm day. Maybe the pilot is inexperienced, I think to myself. The plane lands and bounces multiple times before coming to a sliding stop just short of the tractor. I can't imagine anyone being so cavalier in an airplane. The guy must be a madman. A few of the band counselors, looking more like cowboys than Indians, strut towards the plane as the pilot hops out with a proud grin on his face. They heartily greet each other in a self-congratulatory way, laughing and slapping each other playful as they walk over the new, huge tractor. I grab my loaded camera, shove half a dozen spools of film into my multi-pocketed vest, and hoist the tripod onto my shoulder. Taking large, flat-footed steps, I march towards them, ready to work. It's a man's world up here, so I enter the circle boldly. Excuse me, I say, in the lowest voice possible. They barely look down at me, expecting perhaps that I'm looking for a bathroom. I am from Film West. I spoke with someone on the phone yesterday about shooting this important historic occasion. They don't say anything. They all are frozen in disbelief. I believe Dale called you last night, I continued, putting down the tripod, which is unbelievably heavy. One guy nods slowly. I guess Dale didn't say I was a female. Are you Wheeler? He asked this, his voice rising at the end of the sentence. Yeah, Wheeler, that's me. They look around as though I've come out of nowhere. A big voice from the telephone asks, and you're alone? I nod. At 5'4", I'm a midget amongst them. Yes, and you are? He smiles, a handsome man, sticks out his hand. Just call me Chief. The tractor driver is mounting up, getting ready for the momentous deed of plowing the virgin field. Can you tell me what's going to happen so I can get my camera set up? The men realize that it's me, or there'll be no filming. One guy manages to say, nice camera. I dive in with, yes, well, it's new, it's a Canon, it takes a great picture. So what are you thinking here now? You just tell me what you want. The chief shrugs. What can he do? Well, as I was telling Dale, we're thinking of aerials. We got over 60,000 acres here, all of it wild. And so we're clearing about 80 acres this year. And our friend Ron here is going to help us out. Ron the pilot grins at me. This should be fun is written all over his face. Being terrified of heights and prone to air sickness, I already feel nauseous. I'm going up in a plane with this goon. A couple of guys are already taking off the passenger door and figuring out a way to strap me in so I can look straight down and get a good picture, clear of the wheels in the foreground. One guy sits on the edge of the seat, then reaches out and grabs the strut before putting his foot on the wheel joint base. Once you're in the air, he tells me, this is the best way to get clear of the plane. We use this setup for skydiving. Well, I'm a foot shorter than you, and I'm not that keen on jumping, especially without a parachute. Do you have a harness or something? Oh, yeah, sure. They have this all figured out too. I climb up and they place a seat belt through my rear belt hoop, but it's too flimsy. So then they start taking off their own belts and ingeniously buckling them together to make a harness of sorts, which loops through a couple of handholds and seat mounts. And it seems pretty secure. I can't believe I'm going ahead with this plan. Basically, I'm going to hang out the door. With as much authority as I can muster, I give the pilot some instructions. It's important that you keep a steady speed and a constant distance from the ground so I can frame up. He nods and says, sure thing. I detect a slight smirk forming in the corners of his mouth. Am I imagining this? I'm going to need to reload my camera about every 5 minutes of shooting. So please don't dip and dive when I'm doing this. Just go smooth. It's like threading a needle. You'll have to take me 5 minutes and about 5 times. All the men are strangely quiet as they anticipate my fate. They seem to be in the same state of disbelief as I am, but nobody is going to shut this idea down. I'm going up. No guts, no glory. An older man who has been watching from a distance steps forward and asks with concern in his voice, can you fly that plane with someone hanging out like this, Ron? Oh, yeah, no problem, says Ron. Some of those big guys get out on that strut and they can't let go. I have to fly all over hell's half acre before they either fall straight down or get in. This girl's small. It's going to be easy. Let's rock and roll. Oh, great. I practice climbing in and out of the seat, holding onto the wing strut and finding the stable place for my foot just above the wheel joint until I'm convinced that I'm strapped in safely. I will have to manage the camera with one hand. Thank goodness it's small. But there's one last thing. Let's tie the camera onto this handle here so I don't drop it just in case. They hustle to please me. This is good. When we're up there, always back to the right, okay? It'll make it easier to get a good shot down. Ron nods, as do all the others, all in unison, like a bunch of kids watching a bouncing ball. Are they having me on? I'm not sure. I need a moment to myself, so I'm not sure how long I'll be up there. So I hurry off to the bathroom before takeoff. It's actually an outhouse, and there's a lineup, mostly of women. One older woman wearing a pink nylon scarf speaks Cree to the others, and they graciously insist that I go on in ahead. You going up in that plane? She asks. Yes, I guess so. You're a crazy woman, she laughs. Don't expect us to catch you if you fall. He's a terrible pilot. Huh? Well, you really? Has he had any accidents? Hearing my fear, she holds my arm. He's a good boy, but he likes to show off. You just stop him if you think you're in danger and make him bring you down. Right. Thanks for being so reassuring. Once I'm strapped in and the camera is hung on the rubber cord, the pilot starts the motor up. Don't you find that camera kind of heavy? He asks me. No, I reply. It's a little awkward to hang on to. Doesn't have much of a handle, but it's not the one I usually use, but it's not so heavy. From the moment we lift off, I feel dizzy with fear and nausea. Thankfully, I haven't eaten anything today because nothing is gradual about this ride. The plane rises and falls with every change of topography down below. From lake to forest, field to highway, it shifts up and down with the different temperatures, the different pockets of air. The smell of fuel is thick, wafting all around me. My eyes keep watering from the fumes, and the wind is whipping around my head. I can hardly see the tractor and the crowds in the distance. I shimmy myself closer to the edge of the seat, ready to hang out. He gives me a nod and banks radically to the right. I almost spill out of the door, sliding sideways, grabbing onto the wing strut, clutching the camera, and landing my foot as planned. The harness holds. The camera is like nothing I've ever tried to hold on to before. It's difficult to keep the frame steady. I can hardly bring myself to look down. The view from up here really makes me whirly. The first roll of film is shot mostly with my eyes closed. We circle around and around so I can reload. The second spool falls to the ground. Watching it disappear gives me vertigo. I crawl back into the plane to reload, my heart pounding like a brass drum, gone bonkers, as I manage to get the next spool trimmed and threaded and the camera back on my shoulder. More than once, I drop the camera. Thank goodness it's secured, but it bounces around and I have to stretch out to grab it. I swear we're flying hazardly low right over the tractor as it heads out to the field, but maybe I'm not so capable of judging. Looking through the lens is discombobulating. Everything seems closer and faster. I keep the lens wide open so the focus holds. I just hope I don't vomit on the spectators. It's a good idea to shoot from up here. It gives the event a huge perspective. Hundreds of people are waving and cheering as the plow cuts into the field of green grass, leaving a fresh, dark line behind. Flocks of gulls drop in to feed on the critters that have been carelessly exposed in the tractor's wake. Children run alongside, hopping on and off the huge machine, looking like flecks of confetti in my eye in the sky. When I stop to look beyond what is directly below me, I am moved by the beauty of the country. The parkland is spotted with sparkling lakes flecked with miniature boats. The railway strings of towns and grain elevators together like an endless necklace from one horizon to the other. Sections of farmland are like quilted squares sewn together, framed by straight roads and pinned down by dance halls and churches. Funnels of dust follow trucks down gravel roads. Amoebic shadows from the clouds crawl constantly across the land. What an awesome sight. How lucky am I to see this? I'm overwhelmed with a sense of belonging. I feel like I can see where my grandparents settled, 200 miles southeast of here, close to the little town of Edgerton. This is the upside of taking this risk. The downside is that it might be the last movie I ever shoot. If the camera light readings are correct and the footage is as dramatic as it feels, I will be euphoric. We swoop and dive and buzz around in circles until I'm limp with fatigue and my brain is completely scrambled. A couple of times I release a squawk, but mostly I'm able to contain my fear. I feel so relieved to finally announce that I am out of film. And I feel so relieved to finally announce that I am out of film. And we land to a clapping ovation.
I always love that story, Anne. I've been thinking about height lately because I'm only 5'3". And during the pandemic, the only couple we see are very tall, and my partner's taller than me. So lately I've been realizing I've not hung out with anyone my height in a while.
Well, I didn't really ever think of it having to do with my height, but yeah, I think I had 3 older brothers that used to throw me around that I think maybe is where my fear of heights came from.
I think it's all about heights. Like you walk into the group of men who are
I felt like a little midget.
You go in a plane.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of that scene in Silence of the Lambs where she gets in the elevator. Like Clarice Starling gets in the elevator and there's all these tall male agents standing behind her. And it's just there is that. I think that sets up like that. There's a fear element that you could be overpowered at any moment.
Well, my fear element was that I had, 8 partners, all guys who, in those days, film was expensive. You didn't go out like I had rented the camera. I'd paid big money for the film. It was very expensive. I was costing us all money. You know, it wasn't like video today's keep shooting. You shot specifically what you hoped would be in the film. And so, you know, if it didn't work out, I knew that my days at the co-op were over. So, you know, I knew it was at stake. And not only that, in those days, we had to send that film to Vancouver. So it was almost 2 weeks before I saw the footage. So for 2 weeks, I had to wait and see what that footage was like. And they all waited with me, of course. And they were not happy that I had done that. So
yeah, no, it's just, yeah, it sets things up so well. So we do have a question. We have a question already. While everyone writes their own questions in the box, I'm gonna set up one question for Norm and Anne.
Yeah.
Because we just talked about cost and work and economy. My question kind of relates to that. Both of your books take place early in your careers. Could you both speak about how you were able to capture the places and people from your past? What were some of the tricks? That's the word I always use when I'm thinking of the little tricky things I do to make a poem work or my novel I'm working on work. Some of the tricks that you use. Did you rely on notebooks, or what was your process, sort of thing, to remember, right?
You want to go, Norm?
Go ahead if you want to start. Is this fine?
Well, I mean, I think early on I decided I'd be writing in the first person present, which just makes you sail back in time and be there. All of the stories that I have in my books are stories I told like from the day after they happened. So the vital parts have sort of been a part of my life, and they're all stories that I've used to teach or entertain or whatever. And so it wasn't hard to kind of remember the important parts of the story, but the actual, you know, ambiance, the environment, a lot of the places are still there. A lot of the people I worked with then were, you know, are still buddies. So I think it was really just walking around, sitting with my eyes closed and just putting myself, you know, willing myself to be back in that situation and just reliving it. So I don't know if that's a trick, but that's what I just normally do. I just go and just put myself back in time travel.
I have a learning disability where I don't make pictures in my head. So I have to like craft something that people will visually, sorry, there's a helicopter flying by that visually is intriguing to a reader. I have to use tricks. So that's probably why I refer to it as that. Norm?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because it was part of my work, I did take a lot of notes dealing specifically with portions that dealt with actual deals. Like, so that was quite helpful. But the human side of it wasn't captured in those notes. It was all about evidence. So on the human side, though, I have to say that I think if I look back at my time there, every day there's a combination of elements like fear, wondering whether or not it's going to work, meeting people that are like, different, interesting, going through their own challenges, being a different world and all that. And I knew right away, like after the operation, I was thinking about writing a book. I mean, I didn't think I had I wasn't ready to write a book. I didn't have it was quite a challenging thing for me to do. I've always loved writing, but taking on a book was a challenge that I wanted to push off a bit and kind of practice my writing a bit more, improve my writing before I could get to write the story. So the story stayed with me for quite a while. I spent a lot of time trying to determine exactly what it meant to me, what made it a story, because, you had so many characters and they're all so interesting, but to connect those characters for me so that I understand that there's a beginning and an end to my story, it took me a while to figure out like the impact they had on me and how it changed the way I think and how they fit in the story themselves. So So I think that stayed with me for quite a while. And of course, there's some scenes that, like I remember today opening the door for the first time of that bar. Like I remember like seeing the handle and pulling it. So there's a lot of things like that that just are stay with you. They're so, you know, I remember the music. I remember sitting at one time and, you know, and feeling good, and the music comes back to me and all that. And so a lot of things like that, you know, it stays, you know, it stays still with me now. Like sometimes I hear these songs and, you know, I'm jogging or something, hear this song, it puts me right back there. So.
Was there a particular song that came up a lot at the bar?
Yeah, like the Pretenders, Back on the Chain Gang was one of the main ones. So I used to, yeah, that I remember the chord, the first chord, when you know, I still remember singing the bar and those first chords came on, and I said, like, you know, if I hear the song now, it takes me right back there. Some songs from Prince, Little Red Corvette was playing at the time, with David Bowie's a couple songs. Anyway, so yeah, brings me right back there.
Norm, this is a question from Donna. What made you decide to write the book?
I think at the end, I could see some meaning in this whole thing, because it's easy to separate all the different elements that make up drug use, drug dealing, you know, addiction, the money side of it, which plays a big part of the book in a way. You know, has a big impact. Doesn't come up a lot, but when it does, it has a big impact on me as well. So, and then the thing is, it was all contained in that, in between those four walls. It was, the whole scene was there in front of me. And so I thought, you know, and then that's how I ended up looking at it a bit a different way to myself. So I thought for sure it's a story I wanted to tell, but I think probably more than anything else is the characters, like the people I met. Like I felt like you had a whole world there, you know, and I knew it was a finite, like it wasn't going to last a long, long time. I knew it was like a period in a time and place that was unique, with very unique characters, people from all sorts of different walks of life that find themselves in this unique situation where there's violence and crime and all that. And there are people like, you know, you and I and everybody, you know, normal people with each their background, but they're all in there, put in that same box with all these things to deal with because of their addiction. And I found that, you know, dealing with the people and getting to know them personally and interact with them for that long, I think made it was worth telling their story. I wanted to tell their story for that reason.
Thanks, Norm. There's a message from Sandra Fran. Sandra's waiting for the sequel. So many incredible adventures. The only thing missing in this book is your beautiful laugh as you share so many near-death, fun-filled experiences. I like the mesh of those two things.
Laughing as I was hoping maybe to put on my tombstone that she died laughing. I hope it happens that way. This Norm and I were actually talking. Actually, the pandemic has sort of been interesting because with all of its downs, it certainly has, you know, been ideal kind of time to write. One kind of gets lulled into the kind of mindset of the times, but yeah, I'm writing. I started on a very large novel, something much heavier and weightier. Last like over a year ago, I found it just sort of wasn't going with my headspace at all. So I've returned to the short stories, and so yeah, I've written 4 out of, I guess I'll need 6 short stories, and they're not necessarily, you know, I really find, because I've made so many films and I've written a lot of screenplays and people know me as a filmmaker, not many of my stories are set on set, you know. They're actually, I find it more fascinating that the world around films that people don't know about, the people on the crews, the incredible things that are done and not appreciated, or the relationships that are founded, or, you know, going into a town, like I went into New Denver, up in the Spokane Valley, and made a film about the internment of the Japanese, and that whole experience of telling someone else's story, which probably I would never be able to do today, but they actually embraced me as the storyteller because I had made a war story, which was about my father in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. So they kind of took it as being, a healing film. And so just, the relationship I had with the town for me was as interesting as the experience of making the film. So, they're all of this book, is particularly set in 6 years, basically. And I think the next one will be more a theme of a more universal theme of how people who see each other as so different actually realize that they're so much alike is a common theme.
I remember you talking about music.
Well, I grew up with music, of course. Bye Bye Blues is my mom, and I ended up singing with her from the time I was 3. So all of my films always have some sort of music lacing them together.
I think last time we talked, you were trying to organize a book around the theme of music.
Yeah, that's definitely a theme. Yeah. Music is part of that. I mean, and the music is a way that people do find that they're very much alike. If you don't have to have the language, you can always make music together and find that you communicate very well,
Yeah, I'm tone deaf, but it's okay. I like a good punk song, so.
Right.
Donna has a question for you, Anne. Any chance that your book will become a play or a screenplay, or multiple plays or multiple screenplays?
Well, yeah, I did. I imagine. I mean, I imagine sometimes. Quite frankly, it's so hard right now to make a Canadian feature, and I'm at an age where I have a stack of stories I want to make sure I save and they don't get lost. That writing them into short stories or novels is a way of saving the story, because that's all what it's about for me, saving the stories and the people that live them. And maybe somebody else will, go on to write a musical or a play. I might, there's a couple that are obvious contenders to be plays and movies, but to get a Canadian movie made right now, like I have a couple that I am trying to make right now, getting the money together. It's so difficult that I fear that I don't want to spend all of my time doing that I want to, divide my time into pushing my films forward, but equal amount of time of getting all these stories down on paper.
Yeah, it's you're not the first person I've heard say that, strangely. And it's like, when you were talking about how expensive the film was and the long process, I think of, oh yeah, like I can write a poem with a notebook, like on my own. Like eventually I like a crowd to perform it in front of, but like I've not often thought of the how many things you would need and how many other people you would need to do your art.
Well, you can be so much more truthful though if you're just writing a book and you can stand by what you wrote, right? If you're writing a film, it used to be when I made like Loyalties or Cowboys Don't Cry or whatever, there was one producer and there was one writer, and sometimes it was also the director, but there was only one of each of us. Now if you do like television, you can have 20 producers and they all have a say on, if they don't like the casting or the costume or the shot or whatever. It's like, it is a collaborative art form, and I loved that about it, but now it's sort of become a huge business.
It feels
so
like
the director's role in that is not, you can't go in with a story and say this is the story and it has to stay like this and I'm going to stand by it. I wouldn't work again. They all are going to want to have an opinion, and they don't really care if it was a Cessna or it was a Saddle Lake Reserve or whatever. They don't care. They'll do what's expedient and hopefully the most marketable product. So that is, you know, a sad take on the arts in general right now, eh?
I was just thinking a camel is a
Right,
horse
it's
built by
become about the only way we can really make sure our own stories are saved.
So we have a question for Norm, and then I'll finish up with one more question, and then I'll do some closing remarks. So there's a question for Norm. Donna's been like, good, thanks Donna, gold star. Donna has a question. How has your police family reacted to your book?
Well, that was a very happy surprise for me. Not that I was totally surprised, but I was apprehensive. You know, it's these were, you know, the people that had been there with me and all that, and I was worried that maybe I didn't capture, you know, the scene and what it was, you know, in the same way or in a different way, or maybe I didn't connect with them, or. But I didn't write it with an audience in mind at all. So I just wrote what I felt as a writer I needed to write, and so I was really apprehensive when it came out, and I was thinking, I wonder how exactly the same question. I had myself the same question, and it's been great. It has been excellent. I've connected with people that hadn't worked in 20 years who were down there, and they mentioned that the book reminded them of being there. It put them back there themselves, and a lot of congrats, and you know, and so very well. That was probably one of the nicest aspects of the book coming out, because, you know, like I said, I wrote it as a story, as a writer, and the fact that it connected well with my police family, as you say, it was really important to me. It was really made me feel good anyway.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that when we had the marketing meeting where you're like, I kind of would keep the spheres separate. And I was like, I don't know if that's going to work, but I admire your wanting, like, I accept your wanting to do that. And then I remember later you came and said, it's worked out really well. The spheres melded, but worked out. You talk less with your hands than I do. So, but I imagined you doing this. So we have one last question from Sandra, and then I'll do the sum up. Norm and Ann, what was the most challenging part of writing your books?
Well, I guess for me the most was to, because I had a lot of ingredients, a lot of characters, a lot of things happened in the book. It was a scene, and is to define myself. Like, it took me a long time just to determine what impact the book had on me, what made it a story to me, what it, you know, giving it a beginning and an end, you know, because I had so many sketches of different things happening, and then putting them together is what really mattered to me at the end. But it took me that was challenging for me to put that into a story that made sense and had an impact, and where all the events, you know, added, and I guess to finding the true meaning of the story to me, and because I knew I wanted to write it, but you know, as you know, putting that into on a page is a different story, and so that was probably the biggest challenge. And after that, it was a matter of time, and every day, and rewrites. So that part as well is hard, but the rewriting is nice, it's fun, so I don't mind that. So
that's yeah, it's always writing's hard. And
what the most difficult, well, I had about 20 stories to choose from, so I guess the first trick was to choose which ones. I wanted them all to have, you know, in common some underlying lesson. It's not always obvious. I know a lot of people read the book, they may not, the first time through, they just kind of see the story of a crazy woman going up in a plane. But and all of the stories sort of interweave other little stories into them. So it was really deciding what, and then setting the warp, and then they were all longer, and then kind of gleaning them back to just the bare necessities, and keeping the, you know, I always think of telling a short story or a story. If you're telling it, you have to have a hook, like a like a fishing person. You got to hook your audience, and you've got to keep, wanting them to have in their mind what's going to happen next, what's at stake, how is this going to end. So I think I must have rewritten it maybe 8 or 9 times. So I think it was that technique, when you're a filmmaker and you edit a film, you have to watch the film every time you watch it as though you've never seen it before, no other audience there. So you have to just wipe your mind clean and just, I don't know anything, and try to watch it as though it's the first time. And it's the same thing with a book, is to be able to keep it fresh every time you go through, and try to read what a first-time reader would read, and make sure that you're clear and concise, and that you've always got them on the hook, that they're always wanting a little bit more.
Oh yeah, I know, like the feeling of getting a note back from someone that says, right now, this part of this story or this part of this poem is doing this. What do you want it to be doing? And like having those come together and stuff, because very often in an early draft, you think you're doing something on the page.
Yeah.
And it's not actually doing that yet. But yeah, that's
well, because a lot of my films are very personal, and my stories are very personal. To some extent, there's a lot of people that I love and have known that are in the stories, and they know it's them. And so I think it's hard to, you worry about whether you're going to hurt someone's feelings or misrepresent them, or that they're not going to like what they see, or, you have to just at some point, just say, I've got to tell the best story possible. And I have talks with the people that are in the book and say, it's sort of you, but it's not you. I mean, that happened in Bye Bye Blues. A couple of my relatives went, I would have never worn that dress. I can't understand you dress me like that. I go, well, that wasn't really you, but they get very, very attached to, because they know that you're doing a personal project. So it's all of these stories touch on hundreds of people I've met on my journey. So I know they're looking for themselves, and you just have to forget about that. You just have to get inside that world and be there to write it well.
yeah, it's great advice all around. This recording will be on YouTube, and I'll be pointing out all the great advice both you and Norm gave tonight on how to write true stories well. Take things from your personal life and make them not just be anecdotes. Which, yeah, I want to thank you all for being here, wherever here is for you, and I want to thank the authors for masterclass reading, and for all your great questions. Although Donna gets a special shout out, because Donna did a lot of heavy lifting this evening. We have at New West Press, we have 3 events coming up, and then in May 5th, we have a double launch of 2 brand new novels and a guest reader. So Karen Hoffman is reading from her sequel to What Is Going to Happen Next, and that's A Brief View from the Coastal Suite. And Kevin Holowak, local Edmonton writer, is publishing his debut novel, Light on a Part of the Field. And Tracy Scoos will be reading from her short story collection, Hunger Moon. On May 10th, another double launch, 2 historical novels this time. Both have connections to World War I, which I realize World War I guess 1918 we've all been thinking about because of the previous pandemic of 1918. And I think we've all had that time on our mind, and they were there first. Daniel Neal and Glenn Hooser were thinking about 1918 before we were. So yeah, you guys should show up. May 17th, Edmonton Poet Laureate Nisha Patel will launch her debut collection, which has already gone to a second printing, even though it came out 26 days ago. And she'll be with guest reader who's multiple award nominated Bertram Bickerstaff, whose poetry collection, The Responsive Weeds, is up for 3 awards right now. So it's poetry month for the next couple of days, but so you should remind yourself and sign up for that event. It's the same process, either go to our Facebook page or our website, and our events are there with the links to the Eventbrite page. And while you're at newwestpress.com, that is 1W, you can sign up for our newsletter. Right now we're doing an ebook giveaway of one of my favorite New West titles, Karina Chong's Belinda's Rings. Karina happens to be a finalist for the CBC short story contest for a piece, Kids in Kindergarten. So you can read the piece online at CBC and also possibly win the ebook of her debut novel. I just want to thank you all again. And as I always say at the end of events, remember, if you can, please continue to support small publishers and bookstores of any size, including especially one of our local stores, Edmonton Books. We're in Edmonton. Audrey's Books. We wouldn't be here without you all, the bookstore included. And I'm gonna say good night. I don't know if Kelly wants to hop in for a second or.
Unmute. There we go. Unmuted. Yes, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us. Anne, Norm, some fabulous, fascinating stories. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. Thank you, thank you. And all of you for joining in New West, for including us in tonight's event. This was a lot of fun. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Keep safe. I muted myself there. Have a great evening.
I want to say hi to my cousin Tim Pawsey that I haven't seen for 20 years.
Oh,
Yeah, nice to see your face pop
Hi,
up
Anne. Nice
there.
to see you too.
Yeah,
The last time was probably at Edgerton.
yeah, probably that little town of Edgerton I saw in the distance from that plane.
I have
Yeah.
to tell you, the cousins in the UK are devouring your book. They love it. So there you go.
Oh, good.
And I've yet to get to it, but
Oh, sweet. I thought it would be a little racy for them, but it seems like they can handle it.
I think they're quite kinky underneath.
Yeah.
On that lovely note, I'm
Okay.
going to stop the recording.
Don't record that one.
Good night,
Have a great
everyone.
night, everyone.
Good night.